So good morning once again, everyone. We shall make a start for our second information technology class. Now we shall actually be getting into the content of what we have to learn for IT. So, well, in our last class, um, some persons gave of their opinions, their ideas as to what they think information technology is. Some persons give some very good answers, and so on. Now, what we're looking at today, we're going to start with the first chapter, chapter 1.1, and we're looking at basic computer components. So, what we're looking at basically is what makes up a computer. What is a computer? What makes up a computer? If we look at a device in our environment, can we say this is a computer, or can we say this is not a computer? As basically at the end of today's class, we should be able to say that. So a question to you guys. I know some of you are logging in with your phones, so have any of you ever used a computer?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good, good. Have you used a desktop? Have you used a laptop?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Good.
sir. Yes, sir.
You guys know what's the difference between a laptop and a desktop?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
One
Yes,
big,
sir.
one big and one small. Good. So glad to know that some of you have access to a computer. You would have used that computer. You know how to navigate on that computer and so on. So we're going to be looking at the different parts, as I mentioned, and what makes up that computer. Now, let's see. Here's another question. Have any of you never used a computer? Don't be afraid to say no. I'm not gonna do anything. I just want to know something. And if,
Yes, sir.
okay, so Linese never used a computer. Anybody else? Only one person? Alright, Linesia. So, what if I told you you are using a computer? Would you believe that?
Yes, sir.
No? Well, you are in fact using a computer right now. What device are you using?
My friends,
And what model is that phone?
an iPhone.
iPhone. Very good. So Linesia is currently using an iPhone. Now, if there's any other person that has never used a computer and you're shy to say no, you are in fact using a computer right now. The fact that you are logged into this class right now, it means that you are using some sort of technology, you're using some sort of device, and that is allowing you to be logged into this class. And that device is actually a computer. Now, a lot of persons have the that a computer is just the desktop, that big box that you have in your home, or that small laptop that folds in half and takes up so much little space. Those, yes, they are computers, but those are the more common computers that we have. But other devices that we have in our home, that we have around, are also considered computers. So your phone is actually a computer. Your tablet that you have is a computer. Your game console that you have that you play games on, that is also a computer. When you go to a traffic light, any one of you ever notice a small orange box on a traffic light?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. So that small orange box actually has a computer inside of it, and that is what is controlling the traffic light. So computers is not just the desktop and laptops that we have. Um, from a more technical aspect, computers, when they were first developed, they were not even technologically based. They weren't using electricity. They weren't using all of these different parts that we have today in a computer. It was much more simple. Wasn't even using any technology that we have today. But that is the more technical aspect of it. That's not something that you guys would need to focus on at this level. But it does give you an idea as to what is a computer. It's not just what you commonly know, desktops and laptops, but it's basically almost all devices that we are using today. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. How can we determine what is a computer? So we're looking at the basic components of a computer. So once we know what makes a computer, then when we look at the device and we see that it has this component, it has part A, it has part B, it has part C, then we can confidently say it is a computer. So at the end of today's class, hopefully we finish the entire chapter. You guys could do some practical exercise, look around your home, and see if you can determine other computers in your home. Good. So, as mentioned, we're going to start with the first chapter. Please remember, you are making your own notes. So, if anything I said early you want me to repeat so that you can jot that down, you can tell me. If I'm going too fast, you can tell me to slow down also so that you can make your notes. Everyone following?
Yes, sir.
Only one person following?
Yes, sir.
Two?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
It's gonna be a slow morning. All right, so we're gonna look at the first paragraph, and we're gonna look at what is a computer. So, Alian Adolphus, can you read the first paragraph for us?
Computers are an important aspect of information technology. A computer is an electronic device operating under the control of instructions stored in its memory, whether it whether on its own or connected via network, such as the internet. It can accept data input, manipulate data processing, produce results output from the processing, store the data and results for future use, storage.
Very good. So, here we have a definition for a computer. A computer is an electronic device. How does that electronic device function? Well, it operates by following or being under the control of instructions stored in its memory. So that is the definition of a computer. An electronic device that operates under the control of instructions in its memory. So, if we think about it today, Um, if we think about it, like how we humans function, we're not electronic devices, but how do we function? If we want to, we wake up in the morning and we want to brush our teeth, or we want to fry an egg, how do you go about doing that? Where do you find the instructions to do those things? Anyone? When you want to fry an egg,
Sorry, no memories.
in your memories, very good. Well, if it's the first time, then obviously you're gonna need to, somebody has to train you, or somebody has to tell you what to do. But over time, you will know what to do. And those instructions are stored into your memory. So when you're going to fry the egg, you're going to remember that, look, I'm supposed to crack this egg first, put it into a bowl, not just throw the entire egg just like that into the pan. So you know from memory that that is the instruction you should follow. Everyone on the same page?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Good. So just like how we humans have instructions in our memory and we follow those instructions, the computer is basically the same. It has a memory that will store instructions inside of it. And those instructions are basically telling the computer how to operate, how to function, how to draw, how to open this PDF, how to open Google Chrome, how to play the game, all of that. All of those are instructions your computer follows that are inside of the memory. So that's a breakdown of the definition there of a computer. For those that, that have just joined, please remember to make your notes as we progress. Good, so that's your definition there. Now, a computer can work on its own, or it can work by being connected to the internet. And you guys should know this, that if you have a desktop, if you have a laptop, you don't need, do you need to connect it to the internet to use it? Do you?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No, no, you don't need to. But if you want certain features, like if you want to browse the internet, if you want to play an online game, if you want to chat with somebody online, then you're going to need the network. But if you're going to edit a document, if you're going to maybe watch a movie, you do not need the internet. So a computer can work on its own or connected via the network or the internet in this case in order to perform certain functions. Now, we're going to learn more about network and internet, but just for nutshell purposes, the internet is a form of network, and that's how we can do certain things online. But later on, we're going to learn more. We're going to go more in detail about networks. Good. So, how does your computer function? Well, your computer functions by following this cycle here, the IPOS cycle. IPOS stands for input, processing, output, and storage. That is a very important cycle for you to remember. That is how any computer functions, by following that cycle. And using that same cycle now, you can determine if a device in your home is actually a computer. So let's have a breakdown of that cycle now. Let me drink some water. All right, before we move on to this cycle, everyone clear on the definition of a computer?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. Please remember if um, while we are going through and I lose you, please let me know so that I can clarify. Please tell me to explain further so that, or I can explain more in detail so that you understand, or explain it another way so that you can understand. Good. So the IPOS cycle, let's have a breakdown of that now. How does your computer function? Well, the first part of the IPOS cycle is I. I stands for input. What does input mean? Input basically means to accept data. Accept, take in, put data, however you want to phrase it. Input basically means to get data into the computer, accept data into the computer, put data into the computer. However you want to phrase it, that is the idea. Notice the first part, the first two letters, in, data is going into the computer. It's that simple. Once you see the word in, data is going in. So the next part of our cycle is P as the second letter. P stands for processing. Now, what is processing? Well, basically, processing is manipulating that data. Does anybody know what is the definition or what does manipulate mean?
To control?
To control, good. Anyone else? Just share your opinion. What do you think? We're not look, remember, we're not looking for answers. Yes, Don?
Kind of changing it up into something else.
Very good. I love that. Very good.
Altering the data?
Good. Very good. Very good. So change the data, alter the data, and so on. I forgot what the first person said. So all of that is correct. Very good. So the processing stage is basically making changes to the data, altering the data. So doing something basically with the data. Because remember, at the first stage, we are putting data into the computer. So then logically, if you put something in, then you have to do something with it. So that's like if we compare that to frying an egg. When we put the egg into the frying pan, that's like input. You're putting the egg into the frying pan. Now imagine if you did not turn on the stove, you didn't put any oil in the pan, and especially if you didn't turn on the stove. If you did not turn on the stove, would you expect the egg to cook?
No, sir.
No.
No, sir.
No, that egg would not cook unless you put it in the sun and you left it there for maybe a couple of days. Eventually it might change over time, but you still need some way to change it so that you can get the outcome you want. So that is basically processing. The fact that you're going to turn on the stove, add some heat, add some salt, add some oil, add some shallot, some onion, and so on. You are changing up the data. You're manipulating the data. You're altering it so that we are going to reach to the third stage, which is output. That O part, output, you can reach to that stage now. So at the output stage now is where we produce results from the processing. So that results come from the processing. So after we finish frying our egg, we add in our salt, we add in our seasoning, our whatever ingredients we want to add in. We fry the egg is cooked. And what is our outcome? We have fried egg. That is our output there. So notice the key word here, out, O-U-T. It is getting data out of the computer. So At one stage, we are putting data into the computer, and at another stage, we are getting data or we are producing data out of the computer. So that is actually these three, these first three stages are actually the most important stages of your computer. Why I say these are the most important stages is because the last stage, storage, which basically means to store the data and results for future use or for whenever they want to use the data, but basically it means to store data. Not all computers store data. Not all of them keep the data. So, yes, this is part of the cycle, but not all computer does it. A majority of computer does storage. That is how you have all the files in your computer. That is why you have all the games on your computer. That is storage. It is storing it onto your computer. But not all of them stores the data. Just a few of them. So, a brief overview of our cycle once again. The IPOS cycle, that is the cycle all computers follow. That is how we know a device is a computer. The first stage is input. That basically means getting data into the computer. That is like frying our egg. Sorry, putting the egg into a frying pan. So putting the egg into the frying pan, that is input. Processing, when we're going to change the data, when we're going to add something to it, when we're going to manipulate it, that is like us putting seasoning, we put in our onion, and then we start frying the egg. We add the heat, the egg is now frying. Output now is when we get results. When we change the data, when we alter it, when we modify it, we get results from that data. We change it up to something that we want. So we went from an uncooked egg, from a all the way to a fried egg. So now that we can eat that egg, that is our result. That is your output. Once you get in something out of the computer, that is your output. And then lastly, that output now, in most cases, you're going to want to store that output. You're going to want to keep that output. So say for instance, you're preparing a document, you're doing an assignment. You're doing an assignment on your computer, or maybe you are drawing on your computer. You draw on the computer, you do your assignment, and do you just delete the file? Do you just leave it just like that? Or what do you guys do?
Sir, save it.
You save it, very good. You save that file because you want to use it in the future. You want to use it another day. So when the time comes for you to make a submission, you could print it off and you can submit. When the time comes for you to show off to your friends that look how good I can draw, you could save that as a picture and show them later on. So that is storage. When you're storing the results, you're storing the data that you would have processed. Are you guys following?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Any questions on the cycle?
No, sir.
All right. So let's get some examples now. Let's see if you guys can make some attempt to make some guesses as to what are these different parts that you can figure out for everyday devices. So think of your computer, think of your phone, think of your tablet, and tell me, what do you use? I'm noticing a lot of 9C persons, quite a few 9C persons are joining. I hope they know the timetable change. Yes. Yes, the question is, What part of your computer do you think is getting data into the computer? What parts? Think about it. What part of the computer do you use to put data into the computer?
Sir, can I try?
Yeah, go ahead.
Your mouse or your trackpad.
Mouse or trackpad, that is actually very good. Your mouse and trackpad. So, mouse, trackpad. Anybody else want to try? Alright, so let me talk about this here now. Mouse and trackpad. Now, your mouse, the cursor that you have on the screen, that you move to navigate, to point to different locations. So if I want to go to the top and move this window here, I have to move the mouse. USB port, okay.
Excuse me, sir. Keyboard.
Keyboard is very good. The USB port, no, I would have to say no. USB port is not used as input, but it's I understand your line of thinking that when you put something into the USB port, it's as though you are transferring data into the computer, but technically it's more of the devices that would put data into the computer. So like the mouse, the trackpad, the keyboard, Naya said the microphone, a webcam, all of those are correct. They put data into the computer. So the mouse, when you move the mouse, you are moving a cursor on the screen. When you move the trackpad also, you are moving the cursor on the screen. Because if you think about it, if you did not move that mouse, would the trackpad move? Would the cursor move? Would it?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Unless you got something else in your house moving it for you, then that's a whole other story. But if you did not move that mouse, if you did not move that keyboard, then data would not be inputted into the computer. So very good. We're actually going to look more about this later on. So the mouse, the trackpad, the keyboard. So even the keyboard, when you have a Word document open, like this here, do letters magically appear? What do you have to do?
Type. Sorry, you have to
Type.
type it.
Right. You have to type the keys on the keyboard. So you're basically putting data into the computer. So that is another example of an input. It's called an input device that gets data into the computer. The webcam, the same thing also. It takes your picture, it takes a video of you or a picture of you and puts it into the computer. The microphone also, it puts sound into the computer. If you did not speak or if you did not make any sound, then no sound will get into the computer. Very good. Now, the second device is processing. Let me see if anybody can get this. What device do you think processes or makes changes to the data in your computer?
Sir, like, do you mean the part? Or
Yeah, what part of the computer?
CPU?
CPU. Very good. That's very good. So the CPU is actually what processes data in your computer. Now all of these different parts, we actually have chapters on each one of them that we're going to go more into detail. So this is just a brief overview of these devices. Now output now. What device in your computer gives you an output, gets data out of the computer? Any guesses?
Sir, a speaker.
Sir, a printer.
Very good, very good. A speaker and a printer. Because if you think about it logically, the speaker that you're listening to right now, if I did not speak, or if you did not play some sort of music or some sort of video, you would not have been getting data out of the computer. So very good. Speaker, the printer, when you print something, a document comes out of the printer. Very good. The monitor, very good. The monitor is also giving you output. It's actually showing you what happens. So if we go back to the example of this Word document, when you type on the keyboard, you are seeing what you are typing. And the fact that you are seeing what you are typing, that is an output, because you are seeing the output of you inputting on the keyboard. I hope that made sense here. Either way, all of these, as I mentioned, we're going to go more into detail later on. Now, this should be a simple one. What do we use to store our data?
A flash drive.
Very good, very good. What else? What do you use on your phone?
Sir, memory cards.
Memory card, good. So your flash drive, your memory card, inside of the computer,
Sir, there's also SD card.
SD card, good. SD card
Sir, a CD.
is basically the same. What you said, Naya?
Nia, a CD.
STD, what was that?
CD.
Oh, a CD, yes, a CD is correct. Good. CD, DVD. Once something is storing data, that is storage. That is the fourth part of your cycle. Good. So I hope you guys have a good idea about this cycle. Please remember, this is a very important cycle. Just like how in science, you're going to learn about the water cycle. I'm sure you already learned about the water cycle, how it functions, how important it is to society, for us to get water and all the other elements. That is how important this cycle is. Any computer, all computer, it functions by carrying out this cycle here. So, I'm not going to ask you as yet. I'm going to ask you later on. We're going to talk about it in the WhatsApp group, about what other devices in your home you can perceive or guess to be a computer. Good, because we're actually going to run out of time soon. So we have a diagram here of the IPOS cycle. So the first stage, input, data is input into the computer or put into the computer. Second stage, data is processed into information. Now, this is important to take note of. Later on, we're going to learn the difference. But when data is processed, at that second stage, it actually turns into information. There's a difference between the two terms. So we won't go into detail now to add more confusion. We're going to look at it later when the time comes. Just know, when you process data at that second stage, it turns into information. So if you guys want to research what is the definition of those two, very good of you. So that information now is what is output from the computer. That is the third stage. Information is outputted. And then lastly, fourth stage, we store the information or data. Now notice here, it says data or information, because it could either be either one gets outputted. Like I said, that is the technical part, and later on we're gonna get into that. But just note that you input data, When it is processed, it can actually turn into information or remain as data. And then you output information, and then lastly, you store that data or information that you get there. Good. Now, also one thing to note is that just like how I mentioned that not all computers store the data or information, not all computers output also. Or let me take that back. Not all computers output in a way that you would recognize. Let me give you an example. Remember earlier I said that the traffic light system, if you've ever noticed a small orange box, that is the input. That is the computer. That is the computer that is controlling that traffic light system. Now, anybody want to make a guess as to what is the input part of that computer on the traffic light?
Sir, can you please repeat?
So the small orange box on a traffic light system, that is the computer. And remember we said a computer follows this cycle here, IPOS. So for that small orange box, what is the first stage? How does data get input?
Sir, cable.
A cable. Okay, very good thinking, very good. Because remember we said earlier that input on our computer, we use a mouse, we use a trackpad, keyboard, webcam, all of those things. But actually, yes, you can say a cable, but another device would transfer the data into that computer system. So you can kind of think of it like how if you would connect two devices together with a cable, then you transfer from one device to another. So the input is actually already stored into the this computer here for the traffic light system. It's a bit technical, but just know that the input, it's already in the computer. It's like if the person already typed it in and it's already inside of the computer. So the computer now is going to process that data, is going to process that input, and then we reach the output stage. Now this is the stage I wanted us to focus on. That not all that not all output is the same. So think about it. How does the traffic light system output its data or information? Anyone, how does it output that information or data?
Turn lights change.
The lights change. Anybody else?
Through light signals.
Through light signals. Anyone else? All right, those two are very good answers and they are correct. So the fact that you are seeing the light changing, that is an output. If the traffic light was to lose power, or if the computer was to be destroyed, you wouldn't be seeing any flashing lights. You wouldn't be seeing the signal to walk across the road or to not to walk across the road. But the main fact you are seeing those lights, you are seeing those signals, it is an output from that computer system. So that's the idea I wanted to get across, that we have different types of computers, different form of computers, and their input and output does not follow what we are accustomed to for regular computers. So in this case here, the input, it was already done by a person, so nobody has to type anything or put in anything anymore. And the output is done by flashing lights. So just flashing lights alone is an output from that computer. Are you guys following?
Yes, sir.
Is there any,
Yes, sir.
is there anyone that is confused?
Yes, sir.
Anyone that needs further clarification? All right, so let's continue. So that is so far we looked at the definition of a computer, and we looked at the cycle that a computer must follow. So next we're going to look at is the components of a computer. What basically makes up a computer? And this can also further help you to determine what device in your home is actually a computer. So the next two paragraphs, let's have Asifa, can you read that for us?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
The term computer generally refers to desktop machines and laptops, but it can also include handheld games consoles as well as portable devices, such as smartphones and tablets. The basic components of a computer are categorized as either hardware or software.
Very good. So, as I mentioned already, when you hear the word computer, a lot of you are thinking the desktop computer or you're thinking about laptops. But as I mentioned, those are not only computers in the world. Your game console is a computer. Most portable devices are computers, such as your smartphone. So, your iPhone, your Samsung phone, your blue phone, even your blue phone that you have, that is a computer. Your tablet that you have, that is a computer. Your DVD player that you have in your home, for those of you who still have a DVD player, that is also a computer. So we have a general idea now how computers function following that cycle. Now, what makes up a computer? What are the parts of a computer? Well, a computer has two major parts, two main parts. We have one, the hardware, and two, software. So when I'm teaching this part here, I like to draw this diagram because it helps you to remember the concepts a little easier. So at the top here, we can start with a computer. So this is a computer. And then from that computer now, we branch off to our two categories. So over here, we are going to have hardware, and over here, we are going to have software. Now, take an entire page to make this diagram because we're going to be adding a lot more information to this diagram here. So don't create the diagram too large because we need to add more information to it. So this is just the starting point here. From the computer, we're going to have hardware and we are going to have software. Back to the PDF. So we look at the first category. The first basic category. What is hardware? Alright, so Aziel, can you read from hardware all the way to operations?
Hardware. This is the name given to the physical parts of a computer. There are five general categories. The central processing unit, CPU, is the brain of a computer and controls how the rest of the computer works. It includes the control unit, CU, and the arithmetic and logical unit, ALU. The CU carries out instructions in the software and directs the flow of data through the computer. The ALU performs the calculations and logic operations.
Very good. So, as mentioned, if you look back to the diagram, the computer has two main categories. We're starting off with hardware. So, what is hardware? Hardware is the name given to the physical parts of your computer. So, anything that is physical, anything that you can touch, anything that you can feel, anything that you can hold in your hand, right now for your computer, any part of that computer is the hardware. That is the hardware is the name for the physical parts. So let me see if you guys can put the pieces together. What are some hardware that your computer currently has?
There a screen?
The screen, very good.
Share the keys on the keyboard.
The keys on the keyboard, so why not the entire keyboard?
Oh yeah, that too.
Right. So the screen, remember the screen, we usually call that the monitor. The keyboard, good, very good. Anybody else?
The mouse.
The mouse, very good.
Sir, a motherboard.
A motherboard, very good.
Power supply.
What was that, Fazil?
The power supply.
Power supply, very good. So we get the idea. Basically, any part of your computer that you can touch, that you can feel, that you can hold, the physical parts of your computer, that is the hardware of your computer. Now, please remember that because it actually contrasts what is software. It's actually the opposite for software. So we're going to look at that when we come to that area. So the physical parts of your computer has 5 categories. So those 5 categories are 1, the CPU, 2, input devices, 3, output devices, 4, memory, and 5, storage media. So this is actually why I would create that diagram, because it helps you to remember those categories. So if we come down here, our first category is going to be our CPU, and the CPU is even further broken down into the CU and the ALU. I'm going to give you guys a second for you to write that. So computer, we're looking at the hardware side for now. The first category of hardware is going to be your CPU, and then that CPU is broken down into the CU and the ALU. So what are those two parts? Let's look at them. So the central processing unit, also called the CPU, please note that all of these acronyms you need to memorize. What the CPU stands for? The central processing unit. Now, the CPU is the brain of the computer. Just like how we have a brain that does our calculations, that does our controlling of our body, the CPU is the brain of the computer that controls how the rest of the computer work. So, just like our brain controls our body to move our hand, to allow us to speak, that is how a computer functions, by the CPU controlling its parts. Now the CPU has 2 parts. It's made up of 2 parts. It is made up of the control unit, or CU, and then there's the arithmetic and logic unit. the ALU. Now, what are these two parts? Well, the CU is basically for instructions in the software, and it also directs the flow of data. So, when we say instructions in the software, we mean like when I am moving this cursor here to give instruction to this cursor, when I'm moving this mouse, the computer has to give instruction to this cursor to move this cursor on the screen. When I want to draw here, the computer has to instruct the software to draw in that same pattern. So that's a simplified version of the CU. It's given instructions that the computer will follow. Now, directs the flow of data. Remember, your computer is all about data, inputting data, processing data, outputting data. So it has to direct who goes where. You go there, so it's like you can say the CU or the CPU is like a police at an intersection. It's going to say that this traffic can go, then that one is going to stop, the other direction can go, and so on. That is how the CU functions. And then lastly, we have the ALU, the arithmetic and logic unit, that basically focuses on calculations and logic operations. So technically, your computer basically functions by doing calculations all the time. That's how your computer is functioning all the time, by doing calculations. It's the data. It's not in a form that we can read. It's actually in a form called binary. I'm sure you guys would have learned that already in maths. Binary is basically zeros and ones. You guys know that, right?
Yes, sir.
Right. And that is basically how data is stored on your computer in zeros and ones. And there's constant calculations with those zeros and ones. So basically everything you're seeing here is all zeros and ones to the computer. But just that we can't read zeros and ones, so it needs to put it in a way that we can understand it. So that is why there is constant calculations in the ALU. Good. So that is the first category, the CPU. So the CPU, that is what controls the computer, the brain of the computer. The CPU has two parts, the CU, which does instructions, it directs the flow of data, and then lastly the ALU, that does calculations, arithmetic and logic unit. Good. Any questions in this part here? Any confusion? Any clarification is needed?
No, sir.
All right. So the big question now is,
No, sir.
good, good. So the big question now is, when you look at your computer, when you look at your desktop, especially your desktop, the question now is, what is the CPU? Let's see, desktop.
Sir, I think it's a separate device.
Separate device, okay. So I'm going to give you guys an image. We can look at this image here, the one in the right hand here. So in this image here, what would you guys say is the CPU?
Sure, it's inside the box.
Box.
Good.
Sir, the box next to them.
Good. So now I want you guys to pay attention to this here. A lot of persons have the misconception that this box here is actually the CPU. Now this box here is not the CPU. The CPU is actually a smaller device inside of this box. So if I were to search for a motherboard, your computer has this board inside of it. All these examples here, it has one of it inside of it. And on this board will have your CPU. So if you notice, there's a white square here. You guys seeing that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. So that there is your CPU. This small device that you're seeing here, that is your CPU. But what you're seeing here,
Right?
this is your system unit. The CPU is inside of this box that you are seeing here. Alright, so please remember that for future reference. So don't let me hear you guys ever say that this box here is the CPU. Please remember the difference. You're learning from now that this is not the CPU. This is the system unit. Alright, so we're at 11:31. So we're going to review what we looked at so far. What have we covered so far in this chapter? In revision, we looked at what is a computer. A computer is an electronic device that operates based on instructions stored in its memory. That is how a computer functions. An electronic device operating based on instructions stored in its memory. It can work on its own, or it can work being connected to the internet. Your computer functions by following this very important cycle, the IPOS cycle. I stands for input, getting data into the computer. P stands for processing, manipulating, changing, altering the data, or even calculating the data. And then O stands for output, producing results, getting data out of the computer. And then lastly, S stands for storage, storing the data, storing the information for future use. Then we looked at what are some other examples of computers: game consoles, your smartphone, your tablet, that box on the traffic light. And then lastly, we looked at what are the two main categories of a computer. Please remember this diagram: hardware and software. What is hardware? Hardware is all of the physical parts of your computer. Anything you can touch, anything you can feel, that is the hardware. And we looked at the first category, the CPU, which is the brain of the computer. Just like how you have a brain that controls your body, the computer has a brain. That chip that I showed you here, this small white square there, that controls the computer, and it is made up of two parts: the control unit and the arithmetic and logic unit. Now, before we close, anybody with any questions? Questions going once, questions going twice. Remember, anytime you think of a question later on, you can message in the group so that everyone can have clarification on that also. Great. So if you guys don't have any concerns or questions or anything we looked at for today, that is the end of today's class. Enjoy the rest of your day.